This is Brittany Huffman of Tobacco Free Allegheny. The Department of Housing and Urban Development has opened up the comment period on their smoke-free policy until January 19th. Remember, adverse effects of tobacco use are not limited to the smoker. Information can be found on the HUD website at www.hud.gov or Tobacco Free Allegheny's website, www.tobaccofreeallegheny.com.
Hello, and welcome to Healthy Living with Tobacco Free Allegheny. I'm Joyce Petro. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, recently announced a proposed rule to require the nation's public housing properties to be entirely smoke-free. HUD's proposed rule would require more than 3,100 public housing agencies across the country to implement smoke-free policies in their developments within 18 months of the final rule. Under HUD's proposed rule, public housing agencies must implement a policy prohibiting lit tobacco products, that's cigarettes, cigars, or pipes, in all living units, indoor common areas, administrative offices, and all outdoor areas within 25 feet of housing and administrative office buildings. U.S. Surgeon General Vivek H. Murthy said, quote, "Everyone, no matter where they live, deserves a chance to grow up in a healthy, smoke-free home. There is no safe level of secondhand smoke. So, when 58 million Americans, including 15 million children, are exposed to secondhand smoke, we have an obligation to act," unquote. The Allegheny County Housing Authority has successfully banned smoking in a number of their facilities and plans for all county multi-unit housing to go smoke-free within the next 5 years. As of October 2015, 10 housing complexes have gone smoke-free, affecting approximately 700 units. Tobacco Free Allegheny staff have held over 50 meetings with Housing Authority residents to educate them on the dangers of tobacco, including the hazards of secondhand smoke, stress relief, e-cigarettes, and chronic disease. Joining us today from the Allegheny County Housing Authority are Frank Agazzio, Executive Director, and Jim Bowles, Director of Housing Management, along with my colleague Brittany Huffman of Tobacco Free Allegheny, to discuss smoke-free policies at Allegheny County Public Housing. Welcome, Frank and Jim, and thank you for being with us today.
It's nice to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Jim, how many housing units are owned by the Allegheny County Housing Authority, and how many residents live in those units?
We have 3,100 low-income public housing units in the Allegheny County Housing Authority portfolio.
And about how many people live in the units?
I say approximately 6,000 residents.
And how many of those properties are currently smoke-free, and how many residents are affected by the authority's smoke-free policy?
We currently have 10 sites that are currently smoke-free, and a total of 695 families that it affects right now. Also, we have 5 additional sites scheduled to be smoke-free effective October 1st, 2016. And we're partnering with Tobacco Free and Mercy Behavioral to offer smoking cessation classes to the residents who are interested in stop smoking.
Mr. Agazzio, what is the Allegheny County Housing Authority's smoke-free policy, and what is included specifically in the ban?
What's included in that is there's a ban on smoking in your apartment, on your balcony, in any common areas, or within a close proximity to an exit or entrance to the buildings.
Why did the Allegheny County Housing Authority decide to prohibit smoking?
There are quite a few reasons. One reason was several years ago we experienced 3 major fires that totaled over $1 million for each occurrence. And each one of those fires was caused by smoking. Secondly, obviously there's the health concerns. I get the calls and complaints that the smoke travels through the ventilation system. Mm-hmm. And we have elderly individuals on oxygen and with chronic health issues, and this affects them. And also during the time that we were planning and contemplating banning smoking, there were starting to be some housing authorities throughout the country that were going to do the same. So we wanted to start it here in Allegheny County as well.
Great. What barriers have you experienced in moving to enact these smoke-free policies so far?
We've had some opposition. Basically, what overcame the opposition in certain various communities was the services and the smoking cessation classes that we were able to provide with our partners, and the communication information, the pamphlets, the information we were able to distribute to the residents meant a lot to them in order to get their buy-in to the process.
Also, educating the residents. There was also a financial aspect that a lot of residents didn't take into account. For example, a pack of cigarettes, I believe they cost $7 per pack. And if you're smoking a pack a day, that's actually $210 you're spending on tobacco products. And they really didn't see that until they actually started doing a financial analysis and seeing how much money they could save also, and have more money, more disposable income to do other things. So also how it affected secondhand smoke for their grandchildren, their pets. So it was something that could really have the residents to really think about. And a lot of people decided to stop smoking after they saw a lot of the benefits that come when you stop smoking, not to mention health. Health is the huge part.
If I can go back to the previous question on why we decided, there was another important reason, and it was an economic reason. We have to prepare units for turnover when people move out. It costs us 2.5 to 3 times more to prepare a unit for when the smoker leaves than when a non-smoker leaves. And in this age of funding cuts, every dollar is precious to us. And we would, by the turnover cost, it's painting the unit. We have to put 3 coats of paint on instead of 1 to get the stain out of the ceiling or the walls. Sometimes we have to replace the carpet because of the holes of cigarette burn holes. So there's an economic, a health reason, and also a safety reason.
How long has it taken to change opinion, have you seen?
From the time we start the process for a particular building, we'll start the process in January of the year, and then by the time we provide the information, and there's the buy-in occurs by summer for for the vast majority of the tenants that live in the buildings that we're doing the buy-in. They're buying into it by summer.
What successes have you had so far with the 10 buildings?
Well, the successes we've had is the overall cooperation of the tenants that we have. Very few complaints. We have a process where the manager will talk. If there's anyone who does smoke, there's the process where the manager will talk to the resident privately and make sure that it's not happening again. We've not been, we have not had to take anyone to court on the 10 buildings. So far, it has been very successful, and we're very happy with the results.
Yeah, what I've noticed is it's a great marketing tool. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, when they hear we have smoke-free sites, they want to know where they are, and they are interested in moving to us. So it's really a great marketing tool.
Mr. Agazzio, what's your long-range plan for County Housing Authority properties relative to smoke-free?
Well, and with 5 more buildings, and later in 2016 and in 2017, we'll have all our elderly high-rises smoke-free, which would be approximately 1,500 units. And with HUD putting out the notice that public housing will be smoke-free, we will have even more units that would be smoke-free in the future. might be a little bit difficult to monitor, but it's something that's a very noble goal, and something that's for the benefit of all.
So if the proposed HUD rule is enacted, how will this affect Allegheny County Housing Authority properties and policies? So would it speed up? Would you anticipate that it would speed up your transition to smoke-free properties, or would you think you would stay right on the same timeline that you're currently on?
It definitely would speed up the process. We would sit down with our partners and our management team and establish a new game plan, because to enforce the smoke-free policy at the high-rises where everyone lives in one building would be a different type of enforcement, where you look at our family sites and our scatter sites when you have single development, single housing. We would have to come up with a plan to make sure that everyone is following the smoke-free policies that we have here.
Do you currently have many problems with enforcement of your smoke-free policies?
No, we have some violators who we actually have met with. We have a 4-step policy where we meet with them the first time, go over the smoke-free. We also meet with them a second time. The third time we have them sign a last chance agreement. And then after that, we would start to go through the legal proceedings, but we haven't really reached that point. So it's really, the residents are really buying into it. And we also look at the different PCPs in the areas, and they have sometimes volunteered to speak on the benefit of not smoking, and it also gets the residents to buy in when you see someone that you can relate to. And it's been working out pretty well right now. The first meeting we had with the residents are usually the one that is very emotional, because a lot of people believe their rights are being taken away. But after it settles down and people realize that we are becoming smoke-free, and we have done it at various sites, I think people start to buy into it. And it may be the push that a lot of residents need to stop smoking.
Mr. Bowles, would Section 8 landlords also be required to make their properties smoke-free with this policy?
Based on a proposed policy from HUD, they are not required to do that so far. So the comment period ends January 19th, 2016, so that gives everyone opportunity, residents, housing authorities, to voice their comments or to write what they believe should happen, not happen. So it also gives HUD opportunity to see how everyone feels about becoming smoke-free.
I think a Section 8 landlord could voluntarily do that in their lease. And that would be up to that landlord, an individual landlord, to enact that provision in their lease.
So, Brittany, can you tell us, for those people who are interested in quitting, whether it's because they're going to be living in a facility that requires that the units be smoke-free, or if they're just interested in quitting, can you tell us what resources are available to help people quit smoking?
Sure. The Pennsylvania Free Quit Line is always available for people who are trying to quit, and that's a free telephonic phone line. They can get 5 free phone counseling calls with a trained counselor, and there's also the opportunity to receive free nicotine replacement therapy. They offer the patch, the gum, or the lozenge. And we also have a list of local resources that are available on our website. You can find the different locations where they're offered, and they're offered different times throughout the day. So there should be something there for everyone. And you can always, if you don't want to find it on our website, you can call our office at 412-322-8321 and get that list. And the phone number for the Pennsylvania Free Quit Line is 1-800-784-8669 or 1-800-QUIT-NOW.
Thank you, Brittany. So this is Joyce Petro here from the Allegheny County Housing Authority, Frank Agazzio and Jim Bowles. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
This is Brittany Huffman of Tobacco Free Allegheny. The Department of Housing and Urban Development has opened up the comment period on their smoke-free policy until January 19th. Remember, adverse effects of tobacco use are not limited to the smoker. Information can be found on the HUD website at www.hud.gov or Tobacco Free Allegheny's website, www.tobaccofreeallegheny.com.
Our guest today is Dr. Antoine Duehi, the Medical Director for Addiction Medicine Services at Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic of UPMC, and an Associate Professor of Psychiatry at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. Dr. Duehi, thank you for being with us today. What are some of the risk factors associated with teen smoking?
So if we're referring here to the health risk factors?
Well, are teens who smoke more likely to use other drugs like marijuana, and if so, what's the connection?
Well, first, the kids who smoke have a lot of smoking related health problems. And obviously what we're referring to is really very serious problems. Kids, and we're talking about the serious problems when it comes to the physical problems, as well as the effects, for example, on the breathing, the effects on the lung function, overall health in general, functioning. And so this is very, very much important, because when we are having a conversation with kids and their parents about smoking, it is very important that we discuss also the potential risk factors related to it. The biggest challenge, particularly in kids, that they do not necessarily project into the future. And as we've discussed earlier, from a developmental point of view, they see themselves as very much risk-taking. What's the big deal? In a way, I can smoke. Everybody smokes around me. And so this approach, this kind of an attitude, towards smoking is not really much different than towards really using cannabis too, and particularly the thinking that it is not a big deal if I smoke 1 or 2 cigarettes. It's not a big deal if I smoke 1 joint. Is not going to do anything to my brain, or it's not going to really change my future. I can still really do it. Is related to their thinking that they cannot see the perceptions of risk. Projecting the perception of risk is really very much of a challenge for them. And they cannot really project that potential risk. Like, in a sense, you can sit and try to convince a kid, if you gonna smoke now at the age of 14 and 13 and 14, and smoking could lead you to become addicted and potentially having serious problems, physical health, emotional health, and effects on your brain, and putting you at risk also for other substances like alcohol, cannabis, they're gonna look at you as like, no, but I mean, I don't see any problem. I've been smoking now and I'm all right. I don't have any breathing problem. I think clearly. And so we need to really be very much careful how we approach it from a prevention point of view, is that it goes beyond the fact that we're just educating about the impact. It's just more like having a conversation to really challenge some of these misperceptions, and particularly because these misperceptions are coming from a lot of the marketing, environment, a lot of also people around them. So we talk about social influences. We're talking about also, keeping in mind that their parents, or their guardians who are really smoking themselves, or who really have some an attitude of really, in a sense, allowing their kids to experiment. And this does happen a lot, and when you're going to get these messages, and particularly these mixed messages, they're not going to see the risks. They are not going to identify and recognize the risks related to even smoking 1 or 2 or 3 cigarettes, or even smoking 1 or 2 joints. And this leads to to answer your question about the connection here. The connection is there because if the vulnerable brain of the adolescent, it is not just really, it doesn't get just really sensitized or damaged by the nicotine itself, by the tobacco use, but also could be really very much sensitive to any sort of substance use, as I mentioned, and particularly cannabis.
So you talk about cannabis. Are cannabis and marijuana the same thing? And what specifically then happens to the brain with cannabis use?
Mm-hmm. Well, the marijuana is in fact one of the most common drugs of abuse among teens. And if we're gonna discuss here, in a sense, when we talk about really the cannabis plant, we have, I know, as you know, we have two types. I believe there are three types. They try to always give this typology to it, like trying to really define some really, subspecies of it as really more energizing, other subspecies that are more giving you that sort of a mellow effects. I mean, there is no really science behind all these things. So you have the cannabis plant, and what marijuana is, it becomes like more of a mix of a lot of the dried pieces of leaves and seeds. Obviously you have some really very much of a strong forms of marijuana. Depends on what we call more the content. It's called the THC content. And what I'm referring to is where it's a delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, and it's basically the active ingredient of the drug. And as I mentioned earlier, is there are a lot of parents who really believe that it is not a big deal for their kids to really even try. It's like becomes like very much the cultural perception of it as harmless. What's the big deal if I really experiment? It's like kind of sometimes like a rite of passage in a sense. And this really kind of has been more and more fostered by our culture now, more and more with legalization, and really in a way trying to really portray a picture of it as it is completely harmless, and particularly with the whole conversation that it is alcohol is more harmful than always trying to really compare it to cannabis. And what we know particularly now, marijuana itself is the strands that we have have a much higher amount of the THC. So we're talking about really the what we call the potency of it. So this is a much stronger form, which means that when kids are gonna try a substance like that, and as we know, as we've discussed earlier about their brain being vulnerable, in the process of development and maturation, they gonna be really very much potentially running the risk of damaging some parts of their brain that would potentially lead, as I mentioned, with other vulnerabilities, other really factors, to really that could potentially lead to addiction to cannabis. And particularly we know very well there are more and more studies that have shown also the use of marijuana during the teen years negatively affects the brain structure, volume. We've seen that, and obviously there are some aspects, some parts of the brain that become really very much affected, and as a result of that, these parts of the brain that are responsible for processing, memory, the concentration, the attention span, and when they are particularly damaged, that could potentially lead to the teen's ability to progress or grow very much compromised. And we're talking about whether emotional development, whether we're talking academic achievements, and retention, or whether we're talking about also the interpersonal aspect, the social interactions.
So do you have any tips for parents on how to help their teenager either not start smoking or to help them quit?
Well, first of all, yes, we have a lot of tips and a lot of resources. I think most importantly, first of all, to really always remember that parents have the most influence on their kids. I mean, I know now we're in this age of really social medias. Kids are really in a way more mature, really more out there. They know a lot, and they are very much influenced. Obviously, as we've talked about the marketing, of smoking, and now on top of it also marketing of cannabis, as you know, and particularly in some states. And we need to always remember that the parents have the greatest influence on their kids' behaviors and kids' lives in general. First and foremost, the conversation is extremely essential to happen about very, very early on, between the parents, and their kids about risks, dangers, and allowing more the kids to really share what they know, what they've been influenced by, because obviously you know very well now in schools and everywhere, all these kind of social settings, they're going to be basically have a lot of mixed messages, about tobacco as well as other drugs, particularly cannabis, or alcohol. And it is very important that to have a conversation, to put everything out in the open, and have very much a clear conversation about what's going on, and not use any sort of a confrontational approaches, particularly if you're going to have your son or your daughter coming to you and telling you, I know I've tried smoking a cigarette. I mean, obviously there are some situations like that where the parent could freak out immediately and not know how to handle it and start really attacking the kid in a way. And so we need to really be very careful about the approach, how we're going to be really approaching the kids about it. And there are a ton of educational resources too for the parents. For example, if you go on the National Institute on Drug Abuse website, there are a ton of information, a lot of interactive videos for kids as well as their parents to learn more about the effects and the influence, the impact of drug use. And most importantly also, that to utilize a lot of the resources we have, and as we know, the prevention programs that we have to go to the school, and so we'll talk about really the parents, can be also very much influential in terms of what they could do also within the school systems, and because obviously they are a part of really contributing, to the whole, to the educational activities. They have a say in all these aspects, is to really start incorporating more and more of prevention strategies and more discussion with teachers. So it's in a sense a collective effort, a collective collaborative effort to really all work together. And particularly also we should not underestimate the importance also of the pediatricians, primary care physicians, offices where they could really also start very early on with discussing with the kids, about the harms related to drug use, and tobacco use, and have a conversation, and not just really one-time shot. It's like this has to be given at multiple doses over the course of time. And as I said, if we could very early on work with the kids and make sure that they are not going to touch any tobacco or any cannabis before the age of even 25, if it is possible, but even 18, that then we would be making a huge impact on the epidemic of tobacco as well as cannabis use.
Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on Healthy Living with Tobacco-Free Allegheny. You're invited to listen to this broadcast by visiting www.tobaccofreeallegheny.org.
This is Brittany Huffman of Tobacco-Free Allegheny. The Department of Housing and Urban Development has opened up the comment period on their smoke-free policy until January 19th. Remember, adverse effects of tobacco use are not limited to the smoker. Information can be found on the HUD website at www.hud.gov or Tobacco-Free Allegheny's website, www.tobaccofreeallegheny.com.